Now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Truck Weather Bulletin for August 17th. Well, here we are, another active day worldwide with 4 storms active and 1 dead. We have Tropical Storms Fred and Henri, Tropical Depression Grace, Category 2 Hurricane Linda there in the Eastern Pacific, and the remnants of 16W there still drifting alone in the Western Pacific. 55 storms have formed so far this year as we enter day 229. In the Atlantic, it's day 78 of Atlantic hurricane season, with Fred now inland after making landfall earlier today with 65-mile-an-hour winds. Henri was recently named, and Grace remains a depression but is now expected to become a tropical storm again soon enough as it continues westward. In the Eastern Pacific, there's Hurricane Linda that is slowly weakening. Its annular characteristics have remained quite strong, and of course it will be lasting for quite a little bit more, 4 days it seems, before this finally gives up and turns post-tropical. Moving on over to the Western Pacific, the remnants of 16W continue to persist, a 70% chance of development, which is down some from our last TWB. However, it is expected that it could reform before later posing a threat to Taiwan towards the end of the weekend. In the North Indian Ocean, it remains the same picture as it has been the last few days. Absolutely nothing going on, and nothing will be going on in the next 5 days. No storms are to be expected, as they should. Not really much else to say besides that. In the Atlantic, you can see those 3 storms there. Fred making its way inland, Grace, which is moving south of Haiti, and then of course Henri, which is a tiny blob really that is located just near Bermuda, expected to pretty much make a clockwise turn around that. In the Eastern Pacific, you can quite clearly see Linda there, which it remains with a massive eye there. Annular characteristics that continue to show a very breathtaking sight. You can clearly see those stable conditions around it. So definitely a fantastic sight to see with Linda over here. In the Western Pacific, the imagery is slightly broken there with the first frame of it, but other than that, you can hardly see the remnants of 16W there. They don't exactly look that great. All the collective cloud activity near the Philippines kind of look better than 16W at the moment. Not sure if this really is going to be reforming as the JTWC expects it and going to become a typhoon, but I guess we will have to see what happens. Still quite some time before we can write this system off completely. In the North Indian Ocean, the monsoonal season continues for everywhere in the Bay of Bengal. Mess of clouds going on while the Arabian Sea remains completely dry, as we have been seeing. It does appear that the monsoon is a little bit more enhanced right now there. And then of course we're going off to Grace, which is unfortunately passing south. Why I'm saying unfortunately is because this now means that it's going to be continuing westward and strengthening. Now a hurricane forecasted for the Yucatan as well as the Mexican coast. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for those 30 degrees Celsius temperatures that are remaining persistent near the Mexican coastline. Other than that, it's around 27 to 29 degrees Celsius for the remainder of the basin. In the Atlantic, we're seeing those 31 degrees Celsius temperatures filling in a little bit more of the Gulf Coast. Other than that, it's pretty much 29 to 30 for much of the basin. And then, of course, at the Atlantic, the tropical side of things, constant 28s and 29s all throughout the main development region, as well as some of the subtropics starting to tap into that warmth as well. In the North Indian Ocean, we're still looking out for those 29 to 30 degrees Celsius temperatures. Those 30 much more persistent near the India border there, and then of course the temperatures significantly drop off as you head further west in the Arabian Sea. The Western Pacific remains around 29 to 30 degrees Celsius for much of the basin. Some splotches of 31 near the immediate coast of the Hainan Peninsula to the west there. Obviously no development is expected there, so not really something to be concerned about at this time, but of course it is something worth noting. In terms of the sea surface temperature anomalies, the Sea of Japan is actually cold enough to the point that there are actually some below average splotches finally beginning to appear again. The Zenso neutral conditions continuing other than that, with the Atlantic remaining warmer than average and the Eastern Pacific remaining relatively spotty with the amount of areas that are either near or slightly below average. On this day in 1997, we had Typhoon Winnie, which became very notable for its extremely large eye of over 230 miles there, tied with Carmen of 1960 for the largest eye on record. Tropical Storm Yule was active, would be short-lived, and so would Tropical Storm Ignacio in the eastern Pacific. Of course, this is powered by the cyclone history. You can find their Twitter on the below, and considering the fact that there was nothing active on this day in the Atlantic, it was a completely different scene than what we are seeing today. Well, that takes us up to the next segment there, which means that the next names are here. Kicking it off with the Atlantic, the next name is now Ida, followed by Jillian. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for Marty and Nora. And in the Central Pacific, while America runs on Duncan, the Central Pacific is not running on Hone, and we are still not going to be seeing Hone in the near future. Moving on over to the Western Pacific, the next name here is Omaze, followed by Kansan. And over in the North Indian Ocean, we're still looking out for Gulab and Shaheen. Moving on over to the Southern Hemisphere, specifically the Southwestern Indian Ocean, the next name here is Anna, followed by Batsure. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty and Ruby, and in the South Pacific, it is Cody. We'll be back for another TWB tomorrow night.